Well, good morning. My name's Adrian Bertrand from Atleha-edu and Six Capitals Advisory. It's 10 o'clock and we're due to start at 10. We'll hopefully have a few more folk joining us in the course of the next few minutes. But a very warm welcome to those who've joined us this morning for this opportunity to connect, to talk around retirement funds and climate change. We're very excited to be engaging on this important topic, and thank you so much for availing yourselves to join us today. I'm Adrian Bertrand. I head up the ESG education practice at Six Capitals Advisory, and one of our projects that we support with implementation support is Atleha-edu, and through Atleha-edu we publish educational content that's fit for purpose for retirement fund trustees, principal officers, and other retirement fund industry stakeholders. Our primary beneficiary base for these workshops that we host and for our educational content is organized labor trustees and shop stewards and union organizers. And so we're very excited to be developing or offering this series of virtual workshops taking place in May and June 2022, which will be looking at a number of retirement fund relevant themes. And as you'll see on the screen, this workshop is proudly funded by 91 Asset Management and the ASISA Foundation, who have kindly and generously made financial support available for both publications and other educational content, as well as interactive workshops like today's virtual workshop. So we're most grateful to 91 and the ASISA Foundation for funding today's session. This is the first of a number of these interactive virtual sessions. Today, we're looking at retirement funds and climate change. Next week, we'll be looking at Regulation 28 and the increasing allocation to infrastructure investing for retirement funds. We'll be looking at impact investing on the 24th of May. And then on the 1st of June, we'll be looking at the kind of fast-paced developments in the ESG disclosure standards and frameworks. And then lastly, on the 8th of June, we'll be looking at how retirement and pension funds have evolved over the course of the last century and how that's impacting on some of the developments in the broader retirement fund space, both in South Africa and internationally. The registration link to register for all of these sessions later this month and next month is hopefully available to you already because you've registered to attend today's session. But it will also be shared in the chat function for the meeting, and it's also on the slide that you can see there. In terms of today's program agenda, again, I'm Adrian Bertrand. I'll be introducing our speakers and presenters, as well as just covering the agenda. My colleague Safaku Matiba will be introducing and providing an overview of Atleha-edu and the educational content which is available at no cost to our industry stakeholders such as yourselves. We'll then be hearing from Milani Smith and Sandy Nelson on climate change and investment and the just transition, respectively. I'll then be facilitating a question and answer session after we've received the two presentations. Safaku will then have a few questions, which will be confidence questions, not knowledge questions, to test whether or not you have grown in your confidence on these important topics. And we aim to be able to close our session this morning at 11:30. So roughly an hour and a half together, and we look forward to your engagement. But perhaps before I hand over to our speakers, let's have an opportunity to get to know them. And we'd also like to have an opportunity to get to know you. those who've elected to join us today. So we would like you to just, in a moment, introduce yourself. Which organization do you represent? Your specific role. Are you a trustee or a shop steward or an organizer within the union? And then we're going to also hear from our various presenters and speakers who will take a moment to introduce themselves. But let me start very briefly just about myself. I'm Adrian Bertrand, living and working in Cape Town. And as mentioned previously, I work within Six Capitals Advisory, and a number of the team work in Six Capitals Advisory. One of the projects that we support as Six Capitals Advisory is Atleha-edu, in helping to develop educational content and to host sessions and workshops like today's. My background is in the world of ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance issues, having spent time working for the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, as well as the Government Employees Pension Fund, where I was the Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance Manager from 2011 to 2015. And in 2017, I had the opportunity to partner with Alternative Prosperity to help set up Six Capitals Advisory as an ESG-focused consulting business. Let me hand over to Sefako Matibe, who I'm sure you might have been engaging with for this workshop, to introduce himself, and then we'll hear from Milani and Sandy thereafter. Sefako.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. As Adrian has said, my name is Sefako Matibe. I work alongside him, Sandy, and Milani with Six Capitals, but Adrian and I sort of specifically focus on sort of Atleha-edu and generating sort of the content and these workshops. Most of you are probably familiar with me because I've been texting and calling and emailing. So I sort of help with the organization of these workshops, the organization of the in-person workshops as well, which you'll hear about soon. Yeah, so I'm very happy that you guys were able to make it. I'll also be sort of playing support today for this actual dialogue. So if you're having technical issues, you can just text me, or if you're trying to get other people on, or anything really, you can talk to me. Or otherwise, you can sort of email me afterwards if there's any thoughts or any ideas or any comments that you would like to make. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Hopefully we'll have a good hour and a half.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you with us this morning. I'm Milani Smith. I look after our ESG advisory practice, working alongside Adrian and Sandy, and oftentimes also Sefako, depending on what projects we do. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to spending the morning with you and sharing a bit of knowledge around climate risk and how that will could potentially impact long-term investors. Just maybe before I hand over to Sandy, just a bit on my background. So I started my journey at Alternative Prosperity, actually working in our BEE and transformation business, and then as I finished up my studies in sustainable development at the Sustainability Institute at Stellenbosch University, started spending more of my time in Six Capitals just because it aligned to what I was studying, and what I took a great interest in. And then as I finished up my studies, headed in full time working in Six Capitals. Great. Sandy, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Sandy Nelson. I work alongside Milani in the ESG advisory side of business. And then I also work with Sefako and Adrian in terms of the Atleha, in terms of content creating, and then also on the workshops. And I'll be one of your presenters for today, as you know. So I hope you guys find this session really informative, and yeah, that you enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefaku, Milani, and Sandy, for introducing yourselves. So we'd like to get to know those of you who've made yourselves available to join us for today's dialogue session. This is not a webinar, so we really do want it to be a dialogue, a conversation. We'd love you to ask your questions and to engage with the content as our presenters present on this important topic of climate change and the just transition. So we'd like to understand our audience and our delegates better. We are a smaller group, so that means that it does allow us for good conversations. You should be able to unmute yourselves. Also, just to mention that we are recording this session and it will be made available publicly. We obviously want to have a greater reach and impact in terms of our educational offering through Atleha-edu. So please do note that we will be recording and making this recording publicly available. So we just wanted to let you know that aspect as well. So I'm going to just ask delegates whose names I can see on the screen, if you just take a minute to introduce yourself. Which organization do you represent? What is your role? And perhaps maybe a comment around why you've made yourself available to join the session. What is of particular interest or any specific questions that you might have around climate change and investment. So let's start with Stephen Kunene. Stephen, would you mind taking a minute to introduce yourself, your organization, your role, and any specific interest that you have in the topic?
Good morning, colleagues. I'm Stephen Kunene, working for NAPTOSA in Mpumalanga. I'm the Provincial Chief Executive Officer, assisting members with all their queries and their dealings with the Department of Education. So I joined particularly to know how climate change will impact on long-term retirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us. And that's the benefit of being able to have these virtual engagements. You joining from Mpumalanga, others are joining from the Western Cape, and it would be great to find out where our other delegates are joining us from. And also fantastic to have NAPTOSA represented this morning. Next up, Thandeka Phiri. Thandeka, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. As you heard, I'm Thandeka Phiri. I'm working as the National Training and HR Manager at the Motor Industry Staff Association, which is MISA, a trade union organizing within the retail motor industry. I do represent the organization on a number of boards and more importantly on the motor industry retirement funds, and I also serve on the investment committee therein. So that's why I'm interested in today's topic, and also taking into account the effect that climate change and climate risk has on investments, and just to see, to get to know more about the topic itself. Thank you.
Thandeka, lovely to have you joining us this morning. Where are you joining us from in terms of location?
I'm in Johannesburg.
In Johannesburg, okay, great. And I'm sure it'll come up during the discussions, but the motor industry, especially the KZN production plants, I believe that Toyota was underwater.
Yes.
And, again, a very strong, clear view around the impacts of physical risk presented by changing climate and, flooding, etc. So no doubt we'll be having some good discussion with you in terms of the impacts on the motor industry specifically in light of recent events. Thank you, Thandeka.
Thank you.
Then we have Kevin Frisbee. Kevin, are you able to take a minute just to introduce yourself, your organization, your role, and any specific interest that you have in joining today's session? Okay, I think we'll come back to Kevin. Moses Standard. Moses, would you mind taking a minute to introduce yourself and your organization and your role and your interest in the topic?
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I'm Moses Standar. I'm joining you from Cape Town. I serve on the national leadership of the same organization that Mr. Kunene belongs to, NAPTOSA, National Professional Teachers Association of South Africa. And my particular interest is the impact of climate change and climate risk on investments in South Africa. And secondly, the impact of climate change and climate risk on pension funds. I serve on the finance committee of NAPTOSA. NAPTOSA is an affiliate of FEDUSA, the federation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Moses, and also great that you're representing NAPTOSA as well. And fantastic that you're serving on those executive structures and that you can inform NAPTOSA's investment process as you consider climate change. I know from engagements with the FEDUSA structures that FEDUSA has been developing a climate change policy and strategy. So we trust that today's session will also support those developments. So thank you very much, Moses. Then we have Renee, and Renee, I'm probably going to mess up your surname. Is it Mans? But you can help us with that, the correct pronunciation of your surname when you introduce yourself. Renee, just your organization, your role, and your interest in the topic, please.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And that was spot on. Well done. You're one of the very few people who get it right the first time. I'm from NAPTOSA. I'm based in KZN. I'm the provincial chairperson for NAPTOSA in KZN. And I'm very pleased to see many of my colleagues on the platform as well. Just to say that Kevin Frisbee is our executive officer in the national office. So I've counted about 4 of us that are on the platform this morning. So we have a great interest in this topic. And I think we're all heading towards retirement. So we want to hear more about future investments and, of course, the effect of climate change on what those investments would look like in the future. So thanks, Adrian.
Thanks so much, Renee, and I'm glad that I got your surname correct. It's great to have so many NAPTOSA representatives in today's session. And I guess being teachers, presumably your pensions are through the Government Employees Pension Fund, which is Africa and South Africa's largest institutional investor, so the largest single retirement fund on the continent, with investments, spanning each and every sector of our economy and increasingly in the rest of Africa and the globe. And with that, there's a tremendous opportunity for the GEPF to help facilitate South Africa's transition to a cleaner, greener economy. And with that, there's an opportunity for the GEPF to lead, which is great. So we're looking forward to maybe unpacking some of those options during the Q&A and comment sections of today's session. So thank you so much, Renee. Then Tabsile Mtolo. Tabsile, would you mind introducing yourself and your organization and your role and any specific interest that you have in today's topic? Tabsile, are you able to just briefly, yeah, there we go, introduce yourself?
My name is Tabsile Mtolo. I'm the finance officer at NAPTOSA head office.
Thanks, Tabsile, and your interest in joining today for learning and development? Maybe, okay, thanks, Tabsile. Glad that you could join us today. Then we have Nkosi Pendule Ntantala. Would you mind introducing yourself, please, Nkosi? Nkosi, you might still be on mute. Are you able to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, Adrian.
Morning.
My name is Nkosi Pendule Ntantala. I'm the president of NAPTOSA. I'm based in the Eastern Cape in Port Elizabeth, now known as Gqeberha. Yes, I'm also a teacher by profession, and I'm also interested in the topic, especially as it relates to pension issues and climate change, because this, particularly the climate change issue, it's been part of our discussion in NAPTOSA and FEDOSA at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nkosi. Great to have you joining us from Gqeberha. It's a word or a name I'm still getting used to, but you live in a lovely part of the world. And I'm actually also a teacher by training. I spent a few years in the early phase of my career teaching English in a high school in Belleville, Cape Town. And I am still, just as passionate about education as I was back then. Obviously spending more time with adult education at present. Okay, then I think the last person to introduce themselves is Lena Giane. Lena, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Oh, yeah, no, thank you very much, Adrian. I'm Giane Lina. I'm from Mpumalanga. I'm from Dinosa, the organization. I'm the chairperson of Mpumalanga province. And I'm also interested so much in the issue that deals with climate change, because I have learned that it is one area that we normally turn a blind eye on, but one way or the other, it affects us. And as somebody who stays in Mpumalanga, we have a lot of mines around us. And what happened in KZN is a sign that one way or the other, we are also on our way to be affected by the same thing. The thing is, we do not know when and how, but the broader understanding to us as nurses, we know that after every disaster or after every challenge, whether pandemic or whatever it happens, we become the people who are carrying the challenge that it brought to the world or to our lives after everything. Thank you very much. That's in brief myself.
Thank you so much. And you introduced yourself as Giane Lina. So is the first name Giane?
No, Giane is the surname.
Oh, Giane is the surname. Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure that we call you by the correct first name. So
okay,
thank you,
no,
Lina.
I'm Lina.
Lina, thank you so much. And it's great to have Dinosa represented. So it looks like today we've got the teachers and the nurses well covered. And as you said, important stakeholders in terms of, supporting our society in all respects and bearing the brunt of the impacts, negative impacts of climate change, for example. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking a few minutes to introduce yourselves. It helps us knowing who is joining us today for today's conversation and the dialogue. And what I'm now going to do is to hand over to my colleague, Sifaku Matibe. He's going to just introduce and give a little bit more information about our Atleha-edu platform. And after Sifaku's done that, he'll then hand over to Melanie Smith, who will present on the climate change and retirement fund topic, after which we'll hear from Sandy on the just transition aspects. So thank you, Sifaku. I'll stop sharing and then I'll let you share.
Thank you, Adrian. Can you see the screen? And can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sifaku, as mentioned earlier. And as mentioned earlier, most of you probably know me because I'm the one that's been sort of communicating with you. I think to a lot of you, the Atleha-edu sort of name is probably very new. So I'm here. So my job today is, besides just helping with the sort of technical stuff, is also to give you a sort of brief overview on what Atleha-edu is actually about. So this was started, well, years ago, but we decided to sort of create this brand, which we would then use to help educate retirement fund industry stakeholders on issues and, you know, subjects and topics that were sort of relevant to them, and also relevant to them sort of having an understanding of what the implications are of certain things on their sort of savings and on the member savings and returns. I see we already have a, oh, sorry. I saw a message pop up in the chat. Yeah, so Atleha-edu was the vehicle that we used, that we decided we would sort of distribute all this content on. We have a website in which we have all sorts of different sort of content pieces that we sort of distribute to the likes of you and other interested parties who, you know, couldn't join us today. So we have we split the sort of content that we do into awareness content, as well as interactive initiatives, sort of like the one that we are having today. So I realized that we are actually sort of short on time, so I'm not gonna talk too much. I just want to show you guys what the Atleha-edu website looks like, so that, you know, you guys can sort of peruse it on your own. Let me just get out of this. So this is our website. Like I said, we generate a whole bunch of content on different topics. So it will usually start off with our education publications, which we then from that develop short articles and infographics, video bits, as well as short little podcasts that we call sound bits. So if you go into the tab, we already have, if I'm not mistaken, 12 long publications, which range from like 16 to 20 pages on different sort of topics. We have some on, or we have one on governance and ethics. We have a few on investment fundamentals. We have a very sort of a unique, or I like to think of it as unique, a cultural practices publication, which looks specifically at sort of how the cultural practices and traditions that we have within South Africa influence sort of what happens with members' retirement fund savings. And then we also have publications that are relevant to what we're discussing today. One is this climate-related financial disclosure publication, which we did in partnership with UK Pact and a whole bunch of other sort of implementing partners. We also have a new one that we distributed a month ago, 2 months ago now, on sustainable investing, which goes beyond just sort of looking at climate risk, but also how can retirement funds invest more sustainably. So this is content that we generally will send out on every Friday. I think some of you are already on our mailing list, but I know that on the registration page for this workshop, there was if I'm not mistaken, there was an opportunity for you to opt into receiving this content. But if you are interested in, and it wasn't on there, you didn't opt in, you can always just send me an email, or you can send me a text, and I'll definitely be more than willing to sort of share that link, that registration link. Yeah, so we also have short articles that we use, or that we generate from these long articles. So we have 4 that I think might be of interest to you related to this topic. And that's the ones we did on the sort of climate risk publication. So that's an introduction to climate risk and scenario analysis, climate risk and investment, as well as investment opportunities presented by the transition to low carbon economies. So these are just sort of ways in which we try to make what seems sort of complex, to make it a little more understandable. And also we try to make it in bite-sized pieces, so you're getting all the information that you need, at least as a start. So you know, like, because a lot of the times you never know sort of where to start when you're trying to engage on a certain topic. So the short articles that we make, the podcasts or the sound bits that we make, as well as the videos, are just a way to sort of give you bite-sized pieces of the information that is generated in the long publications. Yeah, so just to quickly run you through there's a video that I actually want to show you, just so you get a sort of taste of what it is that we're discussing today. And that is this one, An Introduction to Climate Risk. I just need, because sometimes it doesn't work, so I just need someone to tell me that they can actually hear the sound in the video.
We can hear that.
Okay, cool.
Climate change will have a direct impact on the financial returns and sustainability of companies, which is why it is becoming imperative for both corporates and investors to integrate climate-related risks into their strategic and operational processes. Companies are increasingly obligated to report on their climate risk exposure to their investors and other stakeholders, such as regulators or government, clients, and employees. Climate change is a material risk for both corporates and their investors, and companies need to provide their stakeholders with information as to 1. What these risks are, and 2. How they will be managed. Insufficient information about climate risks for companies and investors can lead to the mispricing of assets, misallocation of capital, stranded assets, and asset price bubbles, presenting additional risks to companies, investors, and society. There are two types or categories of climate change risk. These are physical and transition risks. Physical risks relate to the physical impacts that result from climate change. Climate change increases the frequency, intensity, and unpredictability of extreme weather events such as floods, sea level rise, droughts, etc. Transition risks result from the transition to a low-carbon economy, spurred on either by regulation or changing consumer preferences, as climate change is increasingly recognized as a global systematic risk. The financial implications of physical risk events include damage to property, infrastructure, livelihoods, and even loss of lives. Longer-term effects include reduced agricultural productivity as a result of temperature changes, and threaten marine ecosystems as a result of warmer and more acidic oceans. Transition risks arise as a result of transition to low-carbon economy, spurred on either by regulation or changing consumer preferences. Transition risks arise when financial institutions fail to incorporate the shift from carbon-intensive to greener business models into their planning, which could result in the risk of having stranded assets in their portfolios. As the transition to lower carbon economies progresses, carbon-intensive companies are likely to suffer from reduced profits, operational and/or regulatory disruptions to their operations, as well as reduced investor interest in carbon-intensive assets. For more information about how climate change will impact on the sustainability of companies and the investment returns provided to investors, as well as access to project resources made available through the South Africa-UK Pact-funded project, please visit www.dnaeconomics.com. We would like to thank South Africa-UK Pact for supporting this educational video. For more information about South Africa-UK Pact, please visit ukpact.co.uk.
Yeah, so that was just a short sort of taste of the sort of subject matter we're doing today, but also of sort of how we turn our content into something that is user-friendly for everyone. We have a whole range of videos. We have 7 videos actually on this topic. So you can feel free to sort of peruse that at your leisure. And then there's only one thing that Adrian forgot to mention that I'll just bring up now before I hand over to Melanie. So we do have virtual workshops of which Adrian has shared a calendar for, but we also have in-person workshops that we will also be hosting. So if you are interested in attending, you can always contact me. Most of you should have my number, but you can always email me. If you are in Joburg, we have one next week. And if you're interested in attending that, please, I might have already contacted you to ask you if you're interested, but in case you change your mind, there's still space. And also if you are in Gqeberha, we will be having one in a few weeks on the 26th of May. So, you know, we'll be discussing some on sort of this topic today, but we'll also be doing some investment fundamentals. So if that's also of interest to you, then please shoot me a mail. Yeah, that is it from me until later. Yeah, I'll hand over to Melanie now.
Thanks, Sifaku. So yeah, maybe I'll present on climate change and yeah, do a bit of intro on that and how it impacts or could potentially impact investments. But before I start with the introduction on climate change, I'm going to ask Sifaku. I think it's just useful for the presenters today to get a sense of everyone's kind of comfortability levels around the topic of climate change. It can be very overwhelming and abstract at times, and also get quite technical depending on the level of detail you go into. So I'm going to ask Sifaku to run our first poll before I start officially presenting, just to see, yeah, and get a sense of how comfortable people are with climate change in general. So this is a completely anonymous poll. You are most welcome to, yeah, click the most applicable answer and share with us so that we are able to see where, yeah, where we need to kind of focus our attention for today's session. And I see already 4 participants have answered, yeah, the poll indicating that they're very comfortable, one indicating that they're slightly comfortable, and then there's a few participants that indicate they're very comfortable, which is good news. It seems everyone has a fair grasp on climate change. And okay, so if there's, I see there's 2 individuals that still need to answer the question. Okay, so I guess, Sifaku, I'm kind of mindful of time. I've added in as an introduction. See, there's 1 individual still needing to answer, but I think it seems to me that most people are fairly confident in discussing the topic of climate change. So Sifaku, I think in the interest of time, and keeping in mind that Sandy also needs to still present, I think we can go ahead and actually, because I was going to show you guys an introduction video, just 60 seconds, very quickly, around climate change. Yeah, I was wondering if it's still worth, if everyone's fairly confident, yeah, in the topic, it might be worth us going into the next poll. And Sifaku's now shared the initial video, or 1 video that we generally produce as part of some of the content that Atleha delivers. And that's kind of been able to give you guys a bit of a sense around what are some of the concerns one needs to think about when you think about climate change. So I wonder if it's not worth, yeah, testing our audience a bit based off of some of the info that's shared, and running our second poll, in fact, Safaku, to see, yeah, how people have focused when you shared that initial video. So the second poll is just around a test question around why do you think we need to be concerned about climate change, and there's various options, and you can pick one of those and indicate indicate why you think it's important to be concerned about climate change and the effects thereof. So I see a lot of people have already indicated that, you know, all of these concerns that have been listed there should be something to be concerned about, because climate change can in fact impact on those. There's still 3 individuals I see that needs to complete this poll before we go into the presentation then. Okay. So you're welcome to pick any of those questions or answers that we've indicated, or the one that you feel is most applicable, and then we'll kick off our formal presentation once everyone's answered. And it's good for me to see that, yeah, most of you do feel that it's all of the above, because yeah, as you'll see as we go through the slides, climate change does in fact have the, I'm going to end the poll. It doesn't seem as if there's more questions coming in. It does have the opportunity, or it runs the risk of impacting things such as food security, a country's economic growth potential, as well as impacting on weather events. So the correct answer would have been all of the above. Okay, so Safaku, if I can maybe then ask you to show the slide around climate risk and the image around 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees difference. Yes. So this is a great image to kind of be able to show you guys what the impact is based off of climate change, and how it impacts so many aspects of society's daily lives. And it really doesn't, yeah, I think the image here illustrates it really doesn't matter kind of, is it, if it's a 1.5 degree or 2% 2 degree increase in global warming. It really, both of those scenarios kind of have serious impacts on society, and we are, for example, just, I mean, something that we've now been exposed to, and we all know people that have probably been affected by this, is the KZN floods. On the top of the slide, you can see the note there that shows extreme weather events. So with a 1.5 degree increase, there's 100% increase in flood risks, and it almost doubles with a 2 degree increase in global warming. And then it affects things such as our water availability, food. So we'll see lower increases in yields and food production at the end of the day, which impacts food security. And in many parts of the world, including South Africa, we're already sitting with situations where we are exposed to food security risks. We've already seen this, you know, increases in sea level rise, Arctic ice, glaciers all over the globe melting at rapid rates, and then naturally, you know, lower impact, lower growth for economies and in various parts of the world. And just to kind of highlight that in the next slide, The most recent World Economic Forum Global Risk Report that was released very early in this year has indicated that the top 3 risks, so around 50% of our global risks over the next 10 years will be environmental in nature, so relating to some other environmental factor. And these global risks do have the potential to also then aggravate additional risks, such as increase in livelihood crises, which we've already seen playing out locally, as well as globally, an increase in infectious diseases. We don't even need to mention COVID again, but these are all things that will most likely be increasing if we don't tackle climate change very seriously and very quickly at that. I've also read in the news recently around research that have reaffirmed the fact that we'll see rapid increases in infectious diseases going forward if we don't address the way we interact with nature, because it results in all kinds of things such as animals needing to move as a result of development. And then naturally all of these kind of environmental risks also result in health risks through the likes of pollution. And this again, we've in South Africa have been very close to home exposed to in the last couple of years, especially in the towns that have high levels of mining activities. And there's been a number of court cases already that have taken to task companies that don't properly manage environmental risks related to their various activities. Maybe if I can just pause there. Any thoughts from the audience around these risks that have been identified? I mean, does any of these risks surprise you? And the fact that so many of them are environmental in nature. We have a small grouping today, so please don't be shy. You're welcome to put up your hand or unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment to make.
Mel, just a comment from my side. This World Economic Forum list that you've highlighted, and we can see the green ones. But what's quite interesting and apparent is that as much as these are highlighted as environmental issues, they very quickly become social and political issues, and one only has to think around KZN and the floods and shortage of drinking water, and the challenges that KZN has in terms of access to fuel and food. It very quickly kind of moves into social and political impacts. So as much as these are initially green or environmental issues, they quickly impact on other areas of life as well.
100%, Adrian. I think Renee, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Melanie. My question might come from a very ignorant point of view, but I would have liked to know what's your perspective on this. The flooding in KZN, to what extent do you think poor infrastructure contributed towards the disaster that we found ourselves in?
So I definitely don't think it's an ignorant question to ask. It's something that we actually internally have also had a discussion about. Speaking just from my personal view, I do think a lot of governments globally as well as locally are unprepared for the impacts that climate change pose, and are kind of on the back foot in needing to sufficiently prepare themselves for dealing with the disruptions that climate change brings, and that one of those are severe weather events. We don't at this stage, I think, have a firm grasp in dealing with the accelerated, the rapid rate at which weather events are changing and intensifying. And yeah, it just points to, one, there's a lot of research that still needs to be done, but I do also agree with you around the comment around infrastructure. It does, these kind of events do in the end point to, a lack of preparedness around infrastructure, I think. Not sufficiently being put into place to deal with these rapidly escalating events, and it's not only locally, it's most definitely a global phenomenon that many governments are struggling with. I hope that answers your question.
Very much so. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Thanks, Renee. Thabang, I see you also have a hand up.
Yes, I do have a hand up, but I can see that you have covered my question, because my question was also around the infrastructure, because all see what have happened there in Durban. So my question was actually based around South Africa, that do we have an infrastructure to protect those that this flood didn't affect as yet? Because we were not expecting something like this to happen in Durban, but yet it happened. So now I'm asking that is our infrastructure in general in South Africa strong enough for if something like this may occur again, like what happened in Durban?
Yeah, no, Thabang, I'm glad I could in part answer your question. But yeah, like I would like to just reiterate, it's not only South Africa. I think there's many examples globally, be it floods or intensified forest fires that are, just running away and out of control. The forest fires, for example, in America a few years ago, as well as in Australia, even like our local situation with water in the Western Cape. It's really something that affects governments all over, and it's just, I think, driven by the fact that there's some research still to be done, things that we don't really know how to fully deal with, that very smart people are still grappling with. But also a case of, I think, a lot of governments were to a certain extent unprepared. I don't think any one of us could have really, I think we knew about the dangers, but the rapid rate at which extreme weather events intensified over the last couple of years is much more rapidly than I think most would have guessed. Adrian, I see you also have your hand up.
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, I just thought, just to add to the discussion around infrastructure and the flooding in KZN Durban. I had the opportunity to watch the Carte Blanche episode, which had a feature on the flooding on Sunday evening. And what's quite apparent is that obviously it's the informal houses that were built on kind of river areas or within flood lines. Unfortunately, they bore the brunt of the destruction and the loss of life and livelihoods. But again, there were also, formal, let's say more affluent suburbs that were also, massively impacted by the floods, with, houses being swept away, etc., with also loss of life, etc. So I think from an infrastructure perspective and rebuilding KZN, there certainly does need to be more what's the word, strategic, building and zoning when it comes to where people rebuild homes. I was hearing yesterday from somebody whose son works at Toyota at their production plant, outside Durban, and apparently they have actually built flooding barriers to prevent floods based on the last Durban flood, but it was not sufficient for the level of water that came through last month.
Wow.
So it does mean long-term planning, and unfortunately in the South Africa context, it seems to be the poor bear the brunt of this type of challenge. So definitely something that we as long-term investors through our retirement funds, and Reg 28 has been updated to allow for more investment into infrastructure type projects. We as retirement fund investors need to get behind that, in terms of those new investment limits to build back better. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Adrian, for your comments. I mean, yeah, it's quite shocking to think that, some of the Toyota plants have taken into account some of the increasing weather events, and it still wasn't sufficient planning. So, yeah, really points to kind of strategic thinking that needs to be done around long-term infrastructure planning. Moses, I see you also have your hand up. You're welcome to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Melanie, my question relates to a report I read yesterday on the rising sea levels in New Zealand at a much faster rate than they had expected. Now, what would be the impact of climate change on the economy in those areas, industries that will have to close, the impact on education, schools, colleges, universities, the impact on job creation or sustainability of employment? If you can give me just some sort of clarity on that issue. If some areas becomes totally, you cannot live there because of the rising sea levels.
Yeah. Moses, that's a very good question. I mean, yeah, if you keep watching kind of the news, you every now and then see massive chunks of glaciers and kind of mountains, massive mountains of ice in the Arctic just falling down, kind of big structures melting into the sea as a result of rapid climate change. I mean, there's some of these massively high mountains up in Africa and the rest of the world where glaciers have started to kind of retract so much that, yeah, there's almost very little ice left on some of these mountains. But I think it'll play itself out similar to what we've seen in KZN, the increase in kind of sea level rising, where you'll have flooding and massive infrastructure damage, schools that need to close, and in some places even probably move, where it results in just geographic locations where you cannot live anymore, essentially. And that I mean, you can think what a massive impact that has, or the knock-on effect on the on economies, where people's livelihoods as a result of not being able to either go to work, not having infrastructure to be able to travel to work, or even standing infrastructure to work in, has at the end of the day. And I'm not sure, I cannot provide you with a number because I'm not sure we actually know what that number is at this stage. But I think globally it will result in massive financial losses at the end of the day, because it impacts the organizations or companies that one at the end of the day invests in, and that means reduced dividend returns, and it impacts on insurance, houses, and the like. Yeah, so it's a difficult question to answer. I hope I started to at least answer part of it.
No, you did. Thank you.
Thanks, Moses. Okay, so Sefako, maybe it's worth then going into kind of linking climate change and finance. So Sefako will show us another video that speaks to climate change and its impacts on investments. Yeah, so Sefako, if I can ask you to play that video, the next video for us, I'd appreciate that greatly.
Okay. Can you see it? No.
I can't
I
see
think it didn't embed.
Why is climate risk an investment risk? As more companies, sectors, and markets are negatively impacted by both the physical and transition risk categories of climate risk, this will increasingly place strain on individual companies, sectors, and markets, and the financial system as a whole, potentially resulting in job losses, increased levels of poverty, inequality, and economic and political instability, both nationally and on a global scale. Other climate risk impacts can include knock-on effects of physical risks, such as falling crop yields, resource shortages, supply chain disruption, as well as migration, political instability, or conflict. Policy risk, financial impairment arising from local, national, or international policy responses to climate change, such as carbon pricing or levies, emission caps, border tax adjustments, or subsidy withdrawals. Liability risk, financial liabilities including insurance claims and legal damages arising under the law of contract, tort, or negligence because of other climate-related risks and impacts. Reputational risk, risks affecting businesses engaging in or connected with activities that some stakeholders consider to be inconsistent with addressing climate change. Market risk, input and product markets will evolve as the cost of GHG emissions are internalized and consumer preferences for carbon-intensive goods change. For more information about how climate change will impact on the sustainability of companies and the investment returns provided to investors, as well as access to project resources made available through the South Africa-UK Pact-funded project, please visit www.dnaeconomics.com. We would like to thank South Africa UK Pact for supporting this educational video. For more
Apologies, everyone. I seem to have red lines on my screen, so I'm just going to stop sharing and then reshare again to see if it makes a difference.
Okay, so Sefako, I think while you are sharing or trying to reshare, it might be worth just checking our time because I think Sandy still also needs to present. How are we doing on time? Do I still have a bit of time or do I need to kind of speed up things?
I think you might need to speed up. I'm not sure because I can't see the agenda.
Okay, I actually do think I need to speed up.
We had the hand over to Sandy from 11.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't think Sandy needs as much time as you do, but yeah, you can proceed, please.
Thanks, Adrian, for confirming that I need to wrap things up. Okay, so maybe Sefako, we can start on the slide speaking to the physical risk and the transition risks relating to climate change. And I'm going to try and quickly go through these because there's a slide that I want to show you guys, which I think from a retirement perspective might be very interesting to you. But you've now seen in this video all of the various risks and opportunities, or rather mostly the risks that could result from climate change. And the big things that we currently kind of seeing is physical risk, which impacts companies' financial performance at the end of the day, either now or kind of going forward. And then they've also spoken about things such as transition risks in the video, which refers to the risks that result as a result of changes in regulation, policies, technology, and kind of consumer awareness around where they want to kind of put their money, and essentially everything that stems from policy and regulatory changes. So a very practical example that is very real in South Africa's context is the example of Eskom. So you would have seen in the news, there's been regulatory changes that have recently been made for to increase the independent power producer capacity locally, as well as providing households with the opportunities to generate their own electricity. So those are very real examples of transition risk in South Africa's case, and that has, at the end of the day, again, knock-on effects on a company like Eskom, because they are already in trouble in the sense that they're struggling to meet demand, but you're also going to see in future extensive drop-off probably in consumers that are able to afford going off the grid, putting in solar panels, and so forth. And then they'll also see, an increase in competition from independent power producers and the like. So those are kind of the two big things that I just want to highlight. So I think for today's session, I'm not going to go into all of the various transition risks and opportunities, climate-related opportunities. But what I want to actually show you guys, which I think would be of interest to you guys, Safaku, is the slide around the research that Vivid Economics did. So you would have seen that a lot of these videos refer to the UK Pact project that we did, and that work we did in participation with a consortium of various partners, and it's also on the DNA website. I'll share a link to that in the chat box. So Safaku, I am going to quickly just share that link in the chat box with everyone. This is a piece of research that was done by one of the partners, Vivid Economics, and they looked at the top 55 largest listed companies on the JSE, and what the results essentially, or what the impact on those companies would be if South Africa had to either delay taking action on climate change, or taking action very quickly, and what the financial implications will be for JSE listed, for those top 55 listed companies. And just to, as a disclaimer, put on this research, the research essentially looked at just the transition risk component, so not even taking into account the physical impacts of climate change. And that research indicated that that particular portfolio has the opportunity to fall between 5% if climate action is taken quickly, and 8% if we delay climate action by until 2050. And some of the sectors that they looked at as part of this research included energy, chemicals, plastics, mining, and minerals, and those as well as manufactured products. And those are kind of the sectors that were even more exposed than many of the other sectors, and so impacted, could have the opportunity to be impacted much more severely in terms of value of those portfolios. So Faku, let me just quickly try and see if I cannot share the slide on my end, just to show you guys a visual. Video. So Faku, can you kindly remind me? Oh, here's my share screen. Right. So let me do this. So this is essentially what we are looking at and the financial implications of if we decide as a country to delay action in terms of addressing climate risk. So, I mean, from an investor perspective, you know, you can really see how portfolios could potentially be affected at the end of the day. And that means it translates into reduced earnings from a long-term investor perspective, knock-on effect that I just wanted to show to everyone. It is real. It has a real financial implication at the end of the day if we do not address climate change very seriously going forward. Yeah, so maybe just before I hand over to Sandy, it might be worth just pausing there and asking if there's anyone that has any questions or comments. I've shared the link around the entire kind of research paper that was done as part of the project. And there you can kind of get a better sense around what was taken into consideration for the research and the scenarios that were used. It is a bit technical, but I mean, I just wanted to kind of demonstrate that over the long term, it does impact on one's ability to earn a good return if there isn't if there's a delayed reaction reaction to climate change. Yeah. So yeah, maybe let's just give people a few minutes to. You're welcome to raise your hand or pop a comment in the question chat box. And then I'll hand over to Sandy to present on the just transition portion. Okay, so I don't see any comments or hands at this stage. Sandy, I'm going to hand over then to you.
So I see a hand. He doesn't have a name there, but I see it's Galaxy J5 Prime. You can unmute yourself if you'd like to add something.
Okay, I don't see.
Oh, no, his video is on and he raised his hand in the video, so it's not a virtual hand.
Okay. You're welcome to unmute yourself. I also see Renee asked a question around to what extent your institution has the attention of our government. So Renee, that's a good question. The UK Pact project was actually run in partnership with UK Pact South Africa. So it does mean that as part of our kind of stakeholder engagements, there were on advisory and steercom meetings, important stakeholders such as National Treasury and individuals, I think, from SARB and insurance sector and banking sector. So that project was kind of run with some of the big important players that had sight of this, and there's at a higher national level at this stage, you know, additional conversation around how South Africa intends to kind of plan and manage for climate risk. Sorry, I just wanted to answer Renee's question, but the gentleman that has registered as Galaxy J Prime, you're welcome to ask your question.
Yes, sorry for that. My name is, sorry for my voice. Very good morning, everyone. My name is Sabelo Zondo, as it was registered by mistake on the Galaxy X5.
No problem.
I will have a very short comment. My comment and also my advice will be based on investing on geological and also architectural on infrastructure. Since we saw in Devon on the landslide, and I'm gonna also have the comment on such a situation where when it comes to investment, I think we have to invest more because and they also face the future of our climate change while we're dealing with the prevention or maybe also the things that will occur in the future. So we have to invest more on our architects or also on our geological. So my question also will be, what is the organizations do on such, and how and when that will be implemented? Thank you.
So can I maybe just repeat what you're asking? So are you wanting to understand yeah, what South Africa is doing from an investment perspective to kind of address things such as infrastructure development?
Yes, it is based on the situation that we saw on past weeks. When we see such event happening in our disposal. So now we have to have measures that we put in place to prevent such when it's happening in the future. So what is our institution, the government, and also all the organization doing about that? And my comment also is the investment have to be more on such while we're dealing with prevention of these things to happen, but we have also be ready if such things happen, how are we going to deal with them? And the question is what they doing and how they doing. If it's not done, when will be done, and if it's done, or if maybe there is any preparation for that, when that will be executed.
So I think it's a very valid question, and the remarks that you make, you know, it's something that should get the necessary attention. I think at this point in time, government is probably just trying to kind of address kind of the social aspect of it to you know, get people housing and the basics such as water, which there isn't at the moment in Durban. And that will probably be an ongoing process. But I mean, I can just speak to kind of at a higher level what we've seen in the industry, kind of clients, you know, of ours working around doing work around climate resilience. There's a climate resilience fund that have been set up by the likes of a Santam, and that kind of funds and so on that go towards those kind of institutions, you know, will be earmarked to address climate change and matters relating to that. I see Adrian's also shared the National Climate Commission's link there for you guys that will provide a lot more information around what the president is aiming to kind of do through those kind of channels. Adrian, do you want to maybe make a few remarks on that by any chance?
Thanks, Mel. Yeah, look, I think obviously that's where a lot of government's focus is going to be in terms of making sure that the longer term planning is done, in terms of climate risk, the transition to a cleaner economy. There's also the Presidential Infrastructure Commission, which I think will be, closely working together with the Climate Commission. And then the industry associations like ASISA are also doing quite a bit from an investor perspective. As you mentioned, the short-term insurance, industry association is also doing a lot of work around climate risk. Because they bear the brunt when it comes to the negative impacts on resulting from extreme weather events, etc. So I think we can expect to see a lot more action in this area with the new increased allocation to private equity to infrastructure through the new updates to Reg 28. We'll also hopefully crowd in additional patient capital, long-term investor capital to invest in these types of infrastructure projects. So I think it's a space that's going to be getting a lot more both government and private sector attention, and we're already seeing that. And certainly the language that is being used in the media, whether it's News 24 or the Sunday Times, it's now the climate crisis, and even the ANC is now starting to do more work around specific policy interventions on climate risk. I see Moses also has his hand up, and I'm keeping an eye on the time. I think this is great that we've got these questions. It may require us, though, to do justice to the just transition. I'm just wondering, and maybe it would be useful to understand from our attendees whether they've got a little bit of flexibility to go beyond our 11:30 finish. If people could just let us know whether they've got 5 or 10 minutes extra that they might be available for, that could then ensure that Sandy presents. Otherwise, I think what we may need to do is just to share the briefing notes and the presentation slides on the just transition, and we can always, schedule another session to focus on the just transition in more detail. Moses, you had a hand up, and I see Tabang also has a hand up. Moses, is your hand still up?
Thank you, Adrian. Mine is just pursuant to what you have just said and the previous speaker. In the research you have done so far, to what extent is there a political will here in our country and globally to address the issues of climate change?
Adrian, that's a tough question. Do you want to answer it, or should I give it a bash?
You're welcome to give it a bash, but maybe a quick response from me is I think increasingly the world over, civil society and government has recognized that climate risk is a strategic risk over the short, medium, and long term. That's why the likes of the World Economic Forum, which represent private sector, but also government and other civil society stakeholders, are paying as much attention to climate risk, for example. And so I think the general sentiment is quite clear. It cannot be business as usual. I think in the South African and the emerging market context, though, especially in developing economies where we still sit with such high levels of unemployment, it is a bit more of a balancing act. And so that's why we need to use the kind of climate financing structures and vehicles that are now being made available, where billions of dollars are actually being made available to South Africa to help us with transition from coal-powered electricity generation to more renewable. So I think overall for developed market economies, it's an easier transition. For emerging market economies like South Africa and other members of the BRICS, it's more challenging, longer term timelines, etc. But the reality is that, all around the world, we need to reduce emissions if we are going to actually stem, global climate warming or temperature increases above 1.5 degrees. So Mel, that would be my comment. You're welcome to respond, and then I see Tabang's hand is also up.
No, Adrian, in the interest of time, I'm not going to respond or add to that. I think it's well covered by your answer, Tabang. Your question?
Okay. Mine wasn't actually a question. I was just saying to Adrian, because he asked that if we are available for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
I just wanted to unsound that one to say, no, I'm available because I made myself available for this session. So if need to continue, then I'm available.
That's great news. So I guess in that or on that comment, Tabang, thanks for that. We can then hand over to Sandy, who will further unpack kind of the just transition and how that kind of needs to be considered when thinking about how we address climate change. And I guess there's also going to be a lot of comments and questions because it's a very important topic in South Africa's case. Sandy, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mel. Okay, so morning once again, guys. So I'll be taking you through an overview of the just transition. So a lot of the existing work on defining just transition, including that from the International Labour Organization and the Paris Agreement, refers to a just transition as a process through which groups with limited resources such as workers, communities, women, youth, and small businesses can benefit from opportunities brought by the transition to green energy. And in doing so, this can contribute towards addressing unemployment, poverty, and inequality. So evidence suggests that at a macro level, the transition will reduce externalities, create more and better jobs, and promote the equitable ownership of low carbon assets. So there's an increasing expectation that responsible organizations will need to start considering the social implications when reacting to climate-related risks and opportunities. For instance, there is a growing recognition that promoting just transition is not only a nice to have, but can have material financial implications as its reputation is at stake. Among the TCFD risks, this is related to reputational risks. As such, there is a need to understand impacts using forward-looking analysis. And one way to do so is to incorporate just transitional scenario analysis. So admittedly, this will be an additional step for investors since it's not in the direct S reporting, but on the company side. Okay, next one, please, Adrian. So why is a just transition important for South Africa? So a just transition is not only morally and ethically desirable, but it is a key requirement for meaningful climate action. This is particularly true in South Africa, given that the country is disproportionately vulnerable to the impacts of climate change for various reasons. So firstly, the country warms at roughly twice the global average, making it highly vulnerable to the physical impacts of climate change, such as floods and droughts, which causes damage to assets. And secondly, South Africa's economic growth has been highly dependent on fossil-based energy, as capital-intensive industries such as steelmaking benefits from subsidized fossil-based energy. The heavy reliance on coal and liquid fuels for energy means that South Africa is one of the most carbon-intensive economies in the world, making the country highly vulnerable to transition risks. And then at the same time, South Africa faces acute developmental challenges linked to unemployment, poverty, and inequality, which has been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But on the positive side, South Africa has some of the best conditions for powering solar and onshore wind energy, and has started to develop capabilities in clean energy, low carbon transport, smart water, the circular economy, and smart agriculture. So in thinking about just transition, it will be important for companies to strategize around how they can leverage improvements in efficiency and competitiveness to contribute towards employment creation and lower poverty and inequality. Next one, Adrian. Okay. So the briefing note that was developed includes a proposed approach to how companies can think about just transition. So the process requires close interaction of various approaches underpinned by strong policies, partnerships, and government support and guidance. So while governments are the primary custodians of a just transition, the private sector, trade unions, and civil society have a pertinent role to play in contributing towards a just transition. For instance, investors can be involved in integrating social inclusion and gender equality considerations into the assessment, stewardship, capital allocation, and policy activities. So using the framework, organizations can develop a strategy that seeks to understand how workers, suppliers, communities, and consumers will be affected by climate change. The elements of a just transition can be incorporated into various aspects, including remuneration, planning, risk management scenario exercises, and capital investment. In using this approach, it's advisable that the reporting should align with the TCFD reporting and should not be isolated from other climate-related financial disclosures. So a common theme across the just transition initiatives is the need for strong social consensus that adapts a bottom-up approach. Next one, please, Adrian. Okay. So transitioning to a low carbon economy is necessary to prevent catastrophic climate change, while neglecting it can bring about significant risks. Notably, reputation risk is a material financial risk, which can affect consumers' perception of the industry or company, which can lead to changes in consumer preferences, stigmatization, and increased stakeholder concern and negative feedback. Unanticipated consequences of mitigation activities could lead to significant community, NGO, or government backlash, which could affect stakeholder sentiment. In developing a just transition strategy, it's important to adopt a bottom-up approach that understands the localized impacts. So at macro level, the transition will most likely have net positive effect in the long term, but at community or local level, there are real possibilities for disruption which need to be considered. Case in point is the South African and Mpumalanga dichotomy. While South Africa as a whole stands to benefit from more and better jobs, there is a risk that employees at the coal plants in Mpumalanga could be left unemployed if a proper just transition is not implemented. So if ignored, it can create significant risks, but if managed properly, it can create a virtuous cycle. So asset managers in South Africa are struggling with the issue of divesting from coal and fossil fuels. This is leading to fossil fuel pragmatism. Not sure how long this will be the case, but in general, ESG is implemented as G and then afterthought E and largely no S. So current practices are not well suited to dealing with a just transition, which is really ESG, or maybe E, super S, and G. So to conclude, the just transition is the ultimate ESG issue. It touches on all three elements: environment, social, and governance. Thank you very much. So do we have any comments or questions regarding a just transition? You can raise your hand or, yeah, drop something in the comments.
Sandy, yeah, if there's any questions for Sandy, please do raise your hand or make a question, put a question in the chat function. We are mindful that we're a little bit over time, but we would like to provide the opportunity for you to ask your questions. What we will be also sharing with you straight after today's session is the briefing note on a just transition, which Sandy and Mel have referred to during the session. We'll also share the presentation slides with you. And once the video has been edited, it will also be made available to you. Lena, you've got a hand up. Do you have a question or a comment for Sandy? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Adrian. I'm saying thank you very much, Adrian, for the opportunity. The thing is, my network was so unstable. I couldn't really hear well on the just transition, but the fact that you are saying you will share the notes and the video with us, probably that will answer my questions. I think I'm fine for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Lena, for advising. We did see your comment in the chat function around your network issues. So yeah, we'll make that document available to you. And of course, you're welcome to engage with us offline directly if you've got any questions. So I think because we are already over time, I think Safaku may have a few questions for us to respond to again. And I also wanted to just remind you about the forthcoming workshops, virtual sessions that we're running in the remainder of the month and next month. And we'd love for you to join us at those sessions. And again, please do use it as an opportunity to also invite other colleagues and members to consider joining. These are free of charge, they're fully funded, and it doesn't matter whether we have 10 people or 100 people. Obviously, we don't want 100 because then it makes engagement a bit more challenging. But please do feel free to invite others to join as well. Safaku, would you like to talk to the polling questions?
Sure. It's just your standard run-of-the-mill questions, just to see how you guys sort of perceived, or if you've derived any value from today's dialogue, and also just one additional one to find out if you guys would be interested in sort of us having a future dialogue where we sort of explore more, because I know we didn't necessarily have enough time to go through everything as much as we would have liked. So maybe if we know that people are interested in sort of doing a part 2 of this, we might sort of actually schedule one. Yeah, so it's basically just just to get that if there's any knowledge that you feel you've gained today, just to compare sort of how much you knew about the topic before joining this dialogue and how much you know now. So it's very quick, no wrong answers. This is all just to help us sort of improve the offering, improve the workshops, and sort of figure out if the content that we're also making actually works for everyone. Yeah, that's really all. So we'll probably give another minute or so, because I see 6 have already responded, and then Adrian will sort of close for us.
Safaku, just remind me, are there 1 or 2 closing polling questions?
No, I'm just saying that we're just giving a minute for the last person to fill in, yeah, and then you can
and close. We're done with the polling. We don't need to put another question up.
Yeah, so I've put them all on this one poll, so just to make it easier for everyone.
Fantastic. So it looks like we've got almost 90% response rate to the polling questions. So thank you very much. And on behalf of Atleha-edu and our funders, the CISA Foundation and 91, we really are grateful for your attendance today. We'll be circling back via email with the presentation slides and some of the other resources that we made reference to during today's dialogue session. Please do spread the word and invite other colleagues to join us next week with our next session, which will be on Regulation 28 and the increased allocation to infrastructure opportunities or infrastructure investing opportunities, which will take place on the 11th of May. Also at 10 o'clock. We may decide to extend these sessions by a little bit longer to give us enough time to have good discussion and debate. But we really do appreciate you staying on a bit longer today. We look forward to seeing you at either our next in the series of virtual workshops or one of our in-person workshops. And if you'd like more information, please do speak to Safaku. And please do make sure that you have registered to receive content and educational communications from us, and do sign up for that. The link was provided in the chat function, and you can also just let Safaku know if you'd like to be added to our database. With that, a big thank you to Melanie Smith and Sandy Nelson for presenting today, for Safaku for also assisting. And we really do appreciate each of you for availing yourselves to join us today. So from the Atleha-edu and 6 Capitals team, and on behalf of our funders, 91 and the Assisa Foundation, we look forward to seeing you at our next session next week. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.